Kwe, Natasuisa Kampanayu Mishunatuuswa, Nachashayawak Shinnecock. My given name is I Lead Canoe. I am Butterfly Woman, and I come from the people known as the people of the Stony Shores, the Shinnecock peoples. When the settlers first came to Long Island, New York, they were greeted by the Shinnecock peoples. And I'm proud to say that we are still living on those very same shores. We have never left. And so as I have been invited by the Hip Hop Caucus for this conference to give a land acknowledgement, I want to give acknowledgement to the lands in which I'm currently calling in from in this virtual experience. And that's the Pechanga people in Southern California. As we emerge into these virtual conferences, it's so important to note that we should still give land acknowledgement to the people and to the lands in which we're currently calling in from. If you are not sure whose lands you are residing on, you are visiting, you can go to www.native-land.ca and you can type in the city or state or country anywhere in the world. And it is a platform that'll bring you right to the area and even break down the language base and the territories in which you are calling in from. But not only that, it's so important to note that we are still here. So when you're talking about Indigenous people, it's also important to talk about us in a present tense and not a past tense. Because if Shinnecock means people of the Stony Shores, and as we're having conversations about the environment, climate change, global warming, the effects that global warming has on mental health, the effects that global warming has on the ecosystem in which the wildlife and our four-legged, winged, and finned and plant life experience, it's important to note that our tribal responsibilities are connected to these. So if we're talking about people in a past tense, we're doing a disservice to the environment. So I would just like to thank the Hip Hop Caucus for giving me the opportunity to give land acknowledgement to all of you, because I know that when we can come together with one mind and one sound, we can heal this earth because we are medicine.
Today, in communities in Louisiana, Houston, and the Ohio River Valley, Black, brown, and indigenous families live with petrochemical plants' negative impacts. Their health, well-being, and livelihood suffer, and their lives are taken too soon because of the harmful chemicals emitted into the air, water, and land. That will soon change when we defeat the industry and get these facilities out of our communities. When that day comes, the people living in these toxic places will be able to experience health and prosperity. Without the presence of petrochemicals in their communities, people will be able to live full lives. Several generations will be able to live together, creating memories while gardening on uncontaminated land, drinking lemonade made from clean, pure water, and watching their kids, grandkids, great-grandkids, and great-great-grandkids play freely outside, breathing fresh air, void of the toxins that have in the past caused asthma, cancer, and other debilitating illnesses. They can once again eat fruit from the trees and fish from clean lakes and streams. New jobs will allow people in the community to innovate and discover new sustainable products to replace those once made from petrochemicals. The future of our communities without the influence of petrochemicals is bright, healthy, and prosperous. Cancer Alley will be no more. It will become Happy Alley, Hope Alley, and Prosperous Alley. It is a future where people will live longer, better, and well. It is a future we will see because we will win this fight.
Hello, my name is Ann Samuel, and this piece is entitled She'll Be Alright. The salt of the air, the sick of a ship, the cry of the unwilling mother, the loss of the land, the whir of the factory, the seal of the power plant door. Have we done too little, started too late to begin to settle the score? The sick of a ship, the cry of the unwilling mother, the loss of a tongue, the pulsing machine, the chains on the power plant door. Excuse me, sir? There's a man with his child here to see you. She says she can't stop drooling and has a rash all over her back. Only went outside for a moment, he said. I mean, there's only so much we can pay to sacrifice a kid, you know? She'll be all right. I hope so. The gears of the rig, sick on a ship, the chirping of frogs, the howl of the wolf we can no longer hear. Is it my fault? Is it my fault? Is it my fault that everything you have you stole? And what will we say when they ask us, hey, did we have accidents like this in 1490 too?
Hi everyone, my name is Lisbeth Ibarra. I'm an 18-year-old climate justice organizer and activist. The fossil fuel industry is dying out as we transition to clean energy and electric vehicles. But they're holding on to dear life by trying to make a big pivot to plastics as their new business. Globally, we've become more dependent on plastic, which is lining the pockets of the fossil fuel industry because plastic is made from the petrochemicals that are produced from oil, gas, and coal, which are all fossil fuels. During the production, consumption, and disposal of plastics or petrochemicals, communities are polluted, the planet heats up, and we're all ingesting cancer-causing microplastics in our air, food, and water. We all know about how at the end of their life cycle, plastics end up in landfills and our oceans, and the chemicals from the plastic leak into our soil and water. But have you thought about what producing plastic in the first place is doing to us and our planet? It's really bad. Petrochemical production requires large quantities of oil and natural gas liquids like ethane and propane to feed into enormous furnaces. These chemicals are heated to extremely high temperatures, creating tiny molecules that can be separated and turned into different plastic products. The emission from this process is responsible for 30% of all greenhouse gas emissions, which are contributing to the climate crisis. As of 2020, the U.S. plastic industry is responsible for at least 332 million tons of carbon dioxide gas emissions per year. This is equivalent to the pollution of 116 coal-fired power plants. Communities of color are the sacrifice zones, where oil and gas companies set up shop to produce petrochemicals and release massive amounts of toxic pollution into local communities. The toxins they release in the air, soil, and water are killing communities by causing extremely high rates of cancer and lung and heart diseases. People living near petrochemical plants in the Gulf Coast and Ohio River Valley, for example, have a 30% higher risk of developing leukemia and a 20% higher risk of developing lung cancer. So the petrochemical industry is destroying our planet for everyone and getting away with it by targeting its production in Black and brown neighborhoods, as if we are the path of least resistance. And the harm doesn't end at the fence lines of communities next to industry. With more and more plastic in our society, we're all consuming microplastics in our air, food, and water. On average, each of us consumes about a credit card's worth of plastic a week, and it stays circulating in our blood. It's making us all sick with cancer, obesity, immune suppression, reproductive issues, and neurotoxicity. This is why shutting down petrochemical plants is crucial. We must head off the fossil fuel industry's plan to expand plastic production. Currently, they want to build over another 120 petrochemical plants in predominantly Black, brown, and indigenous communities, aka their sacrifice zones in the Gulf Coast and Ohio River Valley. During this summit, we will hear from community organizers who live near these existing and planned petrochemical plants. And they will describe the damage they've seen in their community because of these plants. They will also tell us about what we can do to join the movement in the fight to stop the petrochemical industry. Meanwhile, the fossil fuel industry is running PR and ad campaigns right now. They're painting plastics as the answer to everything we need and want in our lives. We aren't fooled by their cheesy campaigns and straight up lies. Communities of color are on the front line of the climate crisis and environmental injustice. We bear the biggest brunt of all the harm being caused by these industries who have taken our wealth for decades, exploiting our labor, taking our land, destroying the values of our properties, destroying our health, and straight up killing us. The oil and gas industry, which are multinational corporations, want to make plastics their long-term survival plan for profit, but we can and will come together to stop single-use plastic and petrochemical production, because our survival, not theirs, is what matters. We must end plastic production by fighting environmental racism. Our planet and our lives can no longer wait.
My name is Jacqueline Patterson. I am the founder and executive director of the Chisholm Legacy Project, which is a resource hub for Black frontline climate justice leadership. So we do everything from research and policy to organizing to coalition building to supporting well-being for leaders, to multiple things, but all towards that ultimate end of supporting Black climate justice leadership towards advancing a just transition away from an extractive economy to a solidarity economy. Sad to say, petrochemicals are kind of in everything that we use, so many things, clothing, detergents like soap, it's in plastics, so anything made of plastic, which is so many other things in our everyday lives, is derived from petroleum, so it's everywhere. The question around petrochemicals is important in terms of its tie to the oil industry, because petrochemicals are obviously, with natural gas, it's part of the oil and gas industry. And so what's often not clear to people is that when you look at an oil refinery, what's happening inside that oil refinery ends up in so many of our household products. And what's also not clear to people is the amount of pollution that it takes to generate all of our household products, including just the energy that runs our lives, whether it's the energy, the lights that we turn on, or what we put in our car, and so forth. The petrochemical or oil and gas industry is kind of at the root of all of that, and it really is to the detriment of our communities. And that's not to say that that all the people in the industry are evil themselves and so forth. That a number of people who are working there genuinely do care for the community and genuinely believe what they're saying, because they're at a certain level in the company, and the company there's the company line. But in the end, we just know the level of pollution, the level of harm to both to people directly and also to the planet, because the oil and gas industry is one of the larger contributors to climate change. It's only going to get worse until we eliminate, really, the fossil fuel, what they often call the oil and gas industry, the fossil fuel economy. The plants are disproportionately located in BIPOC communities, Black, Indigenous, people of color communities, and also low-income communities. The fact that these asthma clusters are often in these communities where, for example, African-American child is 3 to 5 times more likely to enter the hospital from an asthma attack, and 2 to 3 times more likely to die of an asthma attack, and an African-American child is more likely to live next to one of these petrochemical plants. Also, we see cancer clusters that are rising around these petrochemical plants. We just look at places like Crossett, Arkansas, or Reserve, Louisiana, or some of the places in Delaware that are along the petrochemical corridor, or places like Randolph, Arizona, which is a freedmen settlement that's right next to a gas plant in Arizona. And each of these places are clusters of various illnesses that can be directly tied to the the overabundance of these toxins that are in the air. The toxins that they release include everything from carbon monoxide to nitrogen oxide to carbon dioxide to et cetera, and all of these are kind of coming out of those smokestacks and saturating the air that the BIPOC folks are trying to breathe. Even though, one of the things that the petrochemical industry will try to convince everyone from elected officials to community members and the general public is that, oh, well, they're in everything. That means we need petrochemicals. And that is absolutely not true. There are alternatives in terms of materials that we can use to create all of these things. They're pervasive in our lives because we have such a corporatocracy that these industries control everything from the Toxic Substances Control Act, so that we have things like Corexit that was used to clean up the BP oil spill, again, resulting for the petrochemical industry. But so even the material that was used to clean up the BP oil spill was banned in 90 countries because of its level of toxicity. But because we have lobbies, whether it's ALEC, lobbying organizations, whether it's ALEC, the American Legislative Exchange Council, or it is groups like the American Chemical Society, we have groups that are highly resourced to fight against the very policies that would protect us from these toxic substances. I would invite people to look at websites like the International Living Futures Institute. I think it's International Living Futures Institute, that has a whole a section of their website around natural products, and see the abundance of products that can be made naturally. And that's just one of the places. One of the things that we did as the NAACP was to develop this document called Fossil Fueled Foolery, and the whole point there was to really help to inoculate people against the tactics that these companies will use, because they are very, very shrewd and intentional about it often. One of the NAACP branches approached us, and they said that they wanted to they thought we were just going to sign off on this. They were like, we have this agreement that this company wants to give us $10,000 a year every year for the next 10 years. And all we need to do for it is to really support them in building this landfill in a community. And we're like, okay, but that landfill that they're proposing is going to be built over a water aquifer. And so then they were like, oh, but they want to help the children. They were like, this $10,000 is going to buy, whatever it is they were going to use it for the children. And we're like, yeah, it's also going to poison the children. So we have to see that what's often kind of masked as neighborly behavior, whether it's, supporting a children's fund or a chicken dinner, or, being in, providing, like I said, tickets and so forth, that it is masking behaviors that will ultimately poison us and poison the planet, which, comes back to bite us in terms of the disasters, the shifts in agricultural yields, the sea level rise, the flooding, and so forth. So there's so much to be gained in terms of new industries that we can lead on as BIPOC communities, as we kind of shift from a fossil fuel extractive economy to a natural product, natural processes, regenerative economy. So I invite you all to join that movement. So thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sesfo5. I'm a New Orleans native, and I also live around petrochemical plants. Bishop Marcia Dinkins is the executive director of Black Women Rising and launched the Black Abolition Coalition. And Dr. Joy Banner earned a PhD from Louisiana State University and is co-founder and co-director of the Descendants Project. Can you give our audience a picture of what it's like to live near a petrochemical facility? Share with us a description of the physical elements in your community that is near a petrochemical plant.
Some of the things
that comes to my mind when I think about when I live near a petrochemical plant is number one, the smog, the fog, and, all that's going on in the air, how it's thick, how it's really difficult for you to, be able to walk through the smell of the community. The air smells like eggs. The air is very thick. It's something that you put that's like on your tongue. You can almost taste it.
In Louisiana, when our cool front comes in during the fall, we have the north wind blows in, and it brings in the odor from a bauxite production plant that is north of us. So I can't even separate the feeling of the coolness, the appreciation of the fall, the appreciation of the environment without having it connected to that smell, which is a very iron-based, very pungent smell. Right? And so they take over, they become these little cities. And to me, they have the political power. They're ingrained in our communities, our council members, our parish presidents, everybody does what they need to do to support industry. And I think it's because of the monstrous, massive presence that they have all around us, that they are the ones that they're the ones that believe that they are in control.
Can you specifically just share with us how the air and how does it look and how does it smell?
It's like air within air. When you go past, and it's just not in your, the community. It's when you're driving on the highway. It's like you're driving into this immense fog where it's it blinds you. You have to try to walk through. And I know even on the highway when I would drive, the smell would meet you way before you got there to where it was like taking your breath away. But just the health implications behind it, but what it's doing to you just as it's touching and poking you as you're driving through this odor and this cloud that in some instances you just can't describe with any other words, but it smells so bad.
There's one facility, emits black dust. There's red dust from the bauxite production plant, which is aluminum based. And then we have white dust that comes from grain and other, types of facilities. I'm in Cancer Alley, so our risk of cancer are higher than 95% of the rest of the country, at least 95%. So we have cancer risk, we have other health risks, because literally our air is dangerous. You can see it, you can feel it, you can taste it, you can smell it. All of your five senses are engaged, and all of our five senses are telling us that this is dangerous.
What is the water quality like in your area?
Let's think about the Flint water crisis, and what happened with that and how so many people experienced or they found themselves being lead poisoned. Another place is because of what was being fed into the water. So in Toledo, Ohio, we had the algae blooms, because of all of the things that's coming. So the water isn't as healthy as we think it is, and they're not filtering it in the way that they need to filter it. A child who has lead in their system, for every 5 deciliters of lead, they're losing an IQ point. Children are not eating paint chips. These children are too dang advanced. My grandbaby's scrolling already, and he's 1. It's coming from the water. It's coming from the dirt. It's coming from the things that are emitted in our communities when homes are torn down, and this is going into our water.
We also have a lake, the lake surrounding our area, that is a source of seafood, and catfish is a catfish capital of the universe, called Lake des Allemands. It flows into the tributaries of the Mississippi River, and the water impacts and it sustains the wildlife all throughout the various waterways. We that lake is under constant threat from not only agricultural runoff, but from the addition of heavy industrial sites that would flow into the lake and compromise the lake. It's already compromised. The oxygen levels are a bit off. And so our waterways and our water systems are very much in danger. And I think that it goes back to, again, the system of extraction. If everything is just based on capitalism, if there is no attention to human needs and to quality of life, there's never going to be a time where we're putting human interest and human needs over money. And so we see our water systems, our air systems compromised because our elected officials have deferred to industry, and they continue to defer to industry.
Okay, so this question is for Joy. Can you describe some of the illness experienced by people in the community where petrochemicals are located and employees that work at the plants?
So in my community, out of the 8 houses that surround me, 5 households have people who had cancer, who have died of cancer. Our older generations who were not exposed to so much petrochemical, they're living into their 90s. And we have people, my parents' generation, they're dying in their 70s. We're expected that for these industries, we're no longer enslaved. We've gone through the civil rights movement, right? And these plants are also, hotbeds of discrimination. And so it's almost like as Black communities, we don't deserve better. And so it's just a real issue.
Thank you, Joy. This question is for Bishop Marcia. We've talked a lot about the direct impacts of living near plants. But if you don't live near a plant, you still can experience the negative effects of these plants by using products that are made from the plants. Can you share some of the common products that are made from the chemical plants?
Sure. I think the one that we all know about is plastic bags. We also have to look at that in some products, it's in our makeup products. And so, the impact, reproductive toxicity, renal toxicity, thyroid disruption, neurotoxicity, and we're just bringing it into our homes every day. And you don't have to live near it for the impact to flow through, because air is a pathway, water is a pathway. So the implications, gas is something we use every day. And these are all pathways that whether you live near it or not, you stop and you go to it.
Are the healthcare providers in your community aware of the correlation between the previous mentioned health conditions and petrochemical plants? Also, what are they doing to bring attention to the fight as healthcare professionals?
I'm going to say medical professionals are aware of a lot of this. Unfortunately, it stops at a specific age, and it might be 5. They're not pushing things, beyond that to educate parents and to speak to some of the health indicators or factors that's reducing and diminishing our health as a whole, not just the child, but as a whole family, period.
Across the country, there is so much focus on economic development and progress, they call it, that our medical practitioners have to be very careful about avoiding the politics. Medical professionals, I don't believe, have the freedom to be able to speak to it plainly.
Is there anything I did not ask that you want to share with our audience in regards to petrochemicals' health threat to Black and Brown communities?
Remember, we are not in 50 different fights. We are in one fight with 50 different rounds. This is people-centered work, heart-centered work. And hearts that's broken need to continue to talk about what's going on so that they can become hearts that heal.
It's so beautiful. Contagious conversation. I love everything about what you just said, Bishop. We are winning these fights. I'm the middle of Cancer Alley, the petrochemical corridor, and there's about 5 or 6 different massive facilities that our community work has been able to fight off. And what we need to do is start taking what we learn and making sure that knowledge gets transferred from community to community. I also think that we need to understand the value of our land, understand the value of knowing your laws, and understanding your value.
Thank you, Bishop Marcia. Thank you, Dr. Joy. These Black and Brown communities appreciate you guys for the information, and let's keep this conversation going.
What's up, everyone? I'm Christy Drutman of Brown Girl Green, and I'm here at Hip Hop Caucus's We Shall Breathe Summit to discuss the nasty influence of the fossil fuel industry on our democracy and political system. They're literally holding us hostage, y'all. Our society's dependence on oil, coal, and gas didn't come about over the last 2 centuries as an unfortunate twist of fate. It was intentionally designed, funded, and pursued by the fossil fuel industry. And now, in the face of every possible sign that we need to get off fossil fuels, the industry continues to thrive because many elected officials on both sides of the political aisle get significant campaign contributions from oil, coal, and gas interests. In return, politicians pass legislation that subsidize the production and consumption of fossil fuels. And meanwhile, they also block legislation that advances a clean energy and livable future. Let me paint a picture for you. In 2014, for example, the oil and gas industry contributed $64 million to campaigns, committees, and outside groups. According to the Center for Responsive Politics, the oil and gas sector spent $141,600,720 on lobbying in that same year alone, or $387,945 a day. It also employed over 800 lobbyists just to lobby Congress to uphold the fossil fuel industry subsidies funded by taxpayer money. Further, as noted by Oil Change International, for every $1 this industry spends on campaign contributions and lobbying in Washington, D.C., it gets back $119 in subsidies. If we're a democracy, right, how come voters haven't stopped this vicious cycle of undue corporate influence on our democracy? Because according to the data, a majority of voters support ending fossil fuel subsidies and transitioning to a clean energy future. Well, it's simple. The fossil fuel industry plays dirty. I mean, how could you expect anything less but dirty tricks from producers of literally dirty energy? Some of their tricks include, but are not limited to, dividing the people, pitting communities of color, unions, environmental groups, and faith communities against each other, despite all of our common interests and values. They also use every single loophole you can imagine to buy influence over politicians and decision makers at every single level of government, from the local all the way to the international. And one of their most special tricks is convincing leaders, media, and voters that their exploitative, dirty energy economy is the absolute best we can offer working class and poor communities right now. They keep communities and our democracy in a chokehold with a relentless and well-funded false narrative that we must choose between jobs or health, between a strong economy or clean air, water, and food. And what is the common tactic underpinning all of these tricks? What really is their most dirty secret? Get ready, you'll never guess. They're big fat liars. They lie and lie and lie and get up the next day and do it all over again without batting an eyelash. Some of their favorite lies are promising an abundance of good jobs, which, spoiler alert, never really pan out, threatening total demise of local economies if they aren't able to operate with impunity, and of course, their tried and true go-to gaslighting toxic trait, no pun intended, is denying and downplaying the harm that their pollution is causing people and the planet in the face of undeniable facts to the contrary. Can we just call this what it is? It's an abusive relationship. First, let's talk about Beaver County, Pennsylvania. State lawmakers awarded Shell, one of the biggest companies in the world, the biggest tax subsidy in state history to attract a huge new petrochemical complex to Beaver County on the strength of assurances that it would usher in an economic renaissance and attract new manufacturing opportunities. But according to analysis by Ohio River Valley Institute, they're coming up short. Despite the influx of thousands of temporary construction workers, Shell's giant petrochemical project that's slated to open next month has not improved economic conditions in the slightest. Since the project was announced, Beaver County has actually lost jobs, lost population, lost businesses, and ultimately has not reduced poverty. The next example I want to share with y'all is Louisiana, to explain to you why Louisiana stays poor due to this industry. Louisiana is home to extraordinary wealth and natural resources. According to Together Louisiana, the state is number 2 in the nation in crude oil refining, number 4 in natural gas production, number 3 in chemical production, is a top 10 oil producing state, and ultimately is at the heart of our nation's pipeline system. There is such a hub that the city of Erath, Louisiana actually sets the global price for natural gas. They are consistently ranked number 1 or number 2 for foreign investment, so we might as well call them the Silicon Valley of petrochemicals. And I could go on and on naming the ways Louisiana is a powerhouse for this industry, but it's time that we look at the flip side of this coin, which is that Louisiana, despite all this wealth from petrochemical industries, has its people still trapped in poverty. Louisiana ranks 49th in this country for poverty, 46th for infant mortality, 47th for household income, 47th for food insecurity, 50th in income gap by gender, 48th for reading scores, 49th for math scores, 48th for life expectancy. I can keep going, but you get the picture. Louisiana is so rich with resources, yet its residents are so poor and doing so poorly because the wealth that these fossil fuel and petrochemical industries are extracting in profits does not equate to an actual prosperous economy for the very taxpayers who are subsidizing all of this industry in the first place. And now, even after 200 years of greed-driven profits at the expense and exploitation of public health, our climate, and our democracy, oh no, the fossil fuel industry is not stopping there. They're pivoting big to petrochemicals. What does this mean? It means they're counting on all of us to increase our dependence on plastic. This will be their financial lifeline to remain relevant in the face of dwindling oil and fuel consumption. But now we have the tools to know how they're going to pursue their business plan to bring over 120 new petrochemical plants online in the United States alone. They're going to play as dirty as possible and target sacrifice zone communities. And we're not going to let them. Because this wouldn't be a Brown Girl Green or Hip Hop Caucus segment if I didn't give you some action items to join the fight to defeat this industry. First, what we are not going to do. We are not going to play into their hand by buying into their false narratives, getting so discouraged that we just give up on voting, or being divided by them and falling for their efforts to have us believe that as diverse people and places, that it's impossible for us to have common interests in healthy communities and healthy economies. No way. And now, the most important part, what we are gonna do. We are going to use our voices and platforms from our kitchen tables to our social media to our in real life social networks to tell the truth, tell our stories, and shape the narrative on the way we want to live and build our communities. We are gonna go out and vote. And lastly, we are gonna build relationships within and outside of our communities to come together and create real climate justice and economic justice solutions. I'm Chrissy Drutman. This is Hip Hop Caucus's We Shall Breathe Summit. Thanks for listening, and let's go get 'em.
the morning and I'm winning. I check my bank account and I'm winning. True to the game, A1 from the beginning. Keep that beat spinning. Everybody winning, winning, winning. I'm winning. Wow, you hate it. Yeah. My life is far from basic. Sophisticated, decorated. I declare, yeah, I made it. Wealth is only the outcome when I got the income. My life is far from a sitcom. Get into the bag, yep, invest in Bitcoin. We running them up, we building the block. We coming in hot, we never gonna stop. Selling your soul for false hope instead of focusing upon your goals. In God we do trust. Don't fall for the traps they set for us. Yeah, I'm in it for us. Putting them on notice. If you didn't notice, swarming like some locusts. Hustle is the motive. It's been a few years and we still on the scene. We on a whole new level, if you know what I mean. Said I wake up in the morning and I'm winning. I check my bank account and I'm winning. True to the game, A1 from the beginning. Keep that beat spinning. Everybody winning. We all get to glory. I'm just trying to be a testimony. And the world is dying, cause powers keep lying. Sign of the times, accept it or deny it. We gotta keep fighting, cause enough is enough. I'm calling your bluff. We got a lot to say, but we never show up. We can point the finger, but the problem is us. Removing the cuffs. Exercise your power, manifest the dream. Sound the alarm, let freedom ring. Cause we are the movement, and now is the time. No more excuses, just step up to the line. For what is right, stand up. Don't give up the fight. Stand up. Shining through the night. Stand up. Stand up. Everybody, for what is right. Stand up. Don't give up the fight. Stand up. Shining through the night. Stand up. Stand up. Stand up. Stand up. My brother, stand up. My sister, stand up.
If I can spread the message as the master taught, then my living
stand up. My sister, stand up. My people can't just see, help me sing in harmony. Stand up for what is right. Stand up. Don't give up the fight. Stand up. Shining through the night. Stand up. Stand up. Everybody. Stand up. Don't give up the fight. Stand up. Shining through the night. Stand up. Stand up. Everybody winning, winning. Oh, I'm winning. Yeah, I'm winning. Oh, yeah. I'm winning. Yes, I'm winning. I'm winning.
My name is Nikisha Glover. I am the Think 100% campaigner for Hip Hop Caucus. I'm a climate justice practitioner. I'm here with Roshetta Ozane. Roshetta is Healthy Gulf's community organizer for Southwest Louisiana and Southwest Texas, bringing communities together to stop the build out of petrochemical and frack gas export facilities in the region, and is the founder of the Vessel Project of Louisiana. I'm also joined today by Joe Banner. Joe is a lover of Louisiana, and a storyteller that is committed to the fight for more ethical, culturally sensitive, and community engaged representation through the mission of the Descendants Projects. And finally, I am also joined by Keisha Bernard. Keisha is an attorney at CIEL's Climate and Energy Program, and her working focuses on primarily halting the petrochemical infrastructure build out that threatens the global climate and the health of frontline and fence line communities. I am so honored to be here with the three of you today. I can't wait to get into this conversation. Can you share with us how you got involved in organizing against petrochemicals and what led you to this work?
My mom was in business school. My dad was in education. And when the petrochemicals started to locate in St. Charles Parish, they heavily recruited students out of college and told my parents that, why worry about getting a degree? You can just come work for us and we'll give you a good job. And I think it's important to say that because my parents never finished college. My dad was maybe short, I think 6 or 9 hours, and he left. And then he went work for, eventually for the petrochemical companies. But that's what they did. Like, these companies came in and infiltrated our communities, took people out of college, and then said, well, this is the best opportunity you have. And just seeing that it was not the industry that I would ever want to work in. And that was even before they knew the health complications of it. And my parents, they retired. My mom actually was able to get an early retirement, and she was so happy about that. Looking at the health of our communities, I just walk on the levee, and there is just a backdrop of all of these plants on the east bank of the river from us. And it's one thing that you already have industry that's bad, and we're trying to control that. But then you additionally want to put more industry on top of us. So we can't even heal or try to rectify what we have. Is the fact that it's not enough for them. They keep moving the goalposts and saying, yeah, you can take a little bit more. You can take a little bit more. How much is enough? How much is too much to this industry? It's never enough.
You're nobody's sacrifice song. Thank you so much for sharing that. And like you mentioned, like the big lie that comes from petrochemical plants and other toxic industries. Thank you for highlighting that. Thank you for talking about the way that they recruit our young people, and you're just one generation removed. So now I want to pivot to you, Rochetta and Keisha. From your experience, please share with us how you've gone about fighting against the petrochemical industry. What are some of the challenges that you face? Who are the people that you're fighting against? Give us a little bit of background around your fight.
Hey, everybody. So I'm here in Southwest Louisiana, and I feel like Southwest Louisiana is like the forgotten zone because everybody focuses so much on New Orleans and the river parishes and Plaquemines Parish and all those areas. And they have so many groups and organizations there fighting against petrochem and LNG. When we here in Southwest Louisiana are literally drowning from all of the petrochem facilities that we have here. In North Lake Charles, where there's 90% of the Black population, there are no grocery stores, there aren't any health centers, there aren't any hospitals. Whenever we have a disaster, which we know Louisiana is prone to hurricanes, North Lake Charles was the last part of the city to get their lights restored. They were the last part of the city to have their bridge de-iced. They were the last part of the city to have their water restored. And so this area is forgotten about. Yet residents in this area find notes on their doors from industry and investors asking if they want to sell their property, asking if they want to sell their land, and they're offering them pennies for their property. Well, when you drive in the area, you may think no one lives there because homes are still dilapidated from the disasters because people can't afford to fix their roofs. They still have blue tarps on the roof. So you have an area that's surrounded by industry, which has come here and promised to put money into this community promise to hire people from these communities, and promise to make these communities better. Yet when you drive around, it looks like you're driving around a third world country. You drive around the parking lots of the industry and you see every state that surrounds Louisiana except Louisiana. In fact, they don't want to hire the local people and empower local people, because when we're empowered, then we fight against what's not right for us. But when we don't have anything, we feel like we don't have the power to fight. And so the way that I fight against industry is empowering my people. I go into the community and I see what my people's emergency needs are, and I meet them. I can't ask them to fight against LNG if they're hungry. I can't ask them to fight against LNG if their baby needs diapers. I can't ask them to fight against LNG if they got blue tarps on their roof. And if these plants are going to come here and they're not going to provide that, then we're no longer going to allow them to come. And so I stand in front of those doors when I'm knocking and I say, are you hungry? Do you need water? Do your kids need diapers? Do they need school supplies? I'm here helping you, not the industry. So let's go fight against them, because there's no need for them in our community. And that's how I fight against industry.
And ain't that how they do it everywhere, though? They come in with the promise of jobs. They support the little league teams. They give you a park, but that ain't...
All facades, all facades. They wave the shiny things in front of you while you're distracted. They're over here releasing all of these chemicals. There's a flare every single day. That's not what you told us when you came here.
I'm going to tell you bring up an interesting point, too, when you talk about all the out-of-state tags that have descended into your community. Why, if it's so good and great, why aren't these plants in their hometowns, in their communities,
Right. Right.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Right.
What about you, Acacia?
Yeah, I was born and raised in Louisiana, but I'm in DC now. So one of the things that I've been doing to push back against petrochemicals from DC is creating a bunch of tools and resources for people in Louisiana, but also in the Ohio River Valley, where the petrochemical industry is also expanding. I helped create this website. It's pushbackagainstpetrochemicals.org, and there's a bunch of information on there about what petrochemicals are, where they're located, and who's making them. And there's a whole page on taking action to empower people to get involved in the process from early on in the permitting process, talking to decision makers, pushing back once the facilities are already operating, and how to file environmental violations and get in contact with the agencies that are in charge of these facilities. And then there's a whole bunch of additional resources and glossaries to define some of these terms that they're throwing around to confuse people about what these plants are doing. So that's one of the ways I'm helping push back against petrochemicals from DC.
And the first step in fighting against any fight is knowledge and education. So, Keisha, let me ask you real quick. Can you tell me a little bit about some of the laws and policies that you're working on to address or target the petrochemical industry?
Yeah, sure. So basically, the petrochemical industry, for these facilities, they have to go through a bunch of permitting processes that go with the laws that they have to obey. And there's local level permits and laws that they have to abide by, state level permits and laws that they have to abide by, and federal laws. So like at the local level, one of the first things they have to get is a land use permit. So that's a good starting point to tackle and challenge who's allowing them to build, where they're building at. And like in the case of Formosa, the land use designations were changed long before they even got the permits without the communities knowing about it. So that's a good place to start. At the state level, you have waste management and air quality laws to look at and push back there. You have to get permits from the state on different things, so that's a good place to also plug into. And then at the federal level, you have laws like the Clean Water Act, the Clean Air Act, the National Environmental Protection Act, and they all have to get permits under those laws too.
Thank you. So let me ask both you, Roishetta and Keisha, can you give us a brief timeline to describe to our audience about how long it might take to shut down a petrochemical plant?
So I like to make the scenario of an ant farm. And well, when that ant farm, if it tips over, those ants start crawling out and they get everywhere, right? So what do you do first? Do you try to capture all the ants that have gotten out? Or do you turn the ant farm back up so more ants don't get out? So our first thing is to turn the ant farm back up, and that's to stop more petrochemical industries from coming. So we stop the ones that are coming and trying to get the permits. Once we can stop those, then we can shut down what already exists, because if they already exist, that means they've already went through all the steps and they're already they're already operating. And so in order to shut those down, you have to actually find out how they're not in compliance and get FERC involved and get DEQ involved and get EPA involved to see how they're not in compliance. And then they get fined, and then you have to continue to do those things. And so it's harder to stop one that's already in existence. But in fighting against others coming, we also use what's been done by those that have gone and left. Like in Sulphur, there's a whole tank farm that's really a super fun area where you can't do anything else on that land. You can't build anything. It's very contaminated. So we use that to fight against new industry and to show what old industry has done to us.
We've all seen ant farms, and we understand what it means if that ant farm tips over. And your comparison is these petrochemical facilities and the industry itself is like a big old ant farm that's done tipped over into your community. Imagine. Joe, can you tell me how and why storytelling is important in the fight against petrochemicals and the entire industry?
I admit, even like since we're dealing with a grain elevator and on top of the petrochemical companies, I had to learn a lot in a year plus with the lawsuits, with the different agencies, with the permitting. It was a lot to take in. So we understand that not everyone will have that can sacrifice that time in order to come up to speed in order to understand that. So storytelling is so important to just break it down. We had Representative Raul Grijalva with us over the weekend, who is the chairperson of the Natural Resources Committee. And if I can, one of the things that he liked about our visit was that we spoke about the culture. We were able to not just give him facts and figures and data, we also showed this is what it's like being a descendant from a nearby plantation where your people have always dealt with systemic ills and issues, and now seeing the petrochemical companies and heavy industry companies utilize that same system to keep us down. They want you to live in the economic development of heavy industry, but they get to live and tell their story, have their story times with their kids, and clean air and no noise and all those different things that we have to deal with. So we just make it important. A part of our mission is to break things down. We have a campaign that's called HOPE, and it stands for Hands of the People Empowered, so that our community can grasp it and say, okay, this is what it means to be empowered, and we're gonna take it step by step, make it relevant in a way that our community is empowered to fight for themselves. Nothing is more powerful than your own voice. We're just here to facilitate that as best as we could.
Let me pivot to you, Roshetta and Keisha. In what ways can others support the fight against petrochemicals if, one, they live in a community where there is a plant, and number two, if they don't live in a community where there is a plant?
Storytelling is a part of our culture, and it's how we've always, passed messages and stories along. We put it in our rap songs. We put it in our music. We even made, maps with our braids and our hair as slaves. I always encourage the folks, especially in North Lake Charles, you may feel like you don't have a dog in the fight against a petrochem facility, but can you walk out your door and walk down the street less than a block and get groceries? Can you turn on your faucet and catch water from your faucet and drink it safely? Can you go outside and take a big, deep breath and not smell anything coming from industry? Those are your stories. That's how you fight against industry in your community. You tell folks how it impacts and affects you. You sign on during comment periods. You sign on to petitions. You show up to hearings. You show up to community meetings. You show up at the poll to vote. If you don't live in the community, you show up and you ask folks on the grounds in the community, how can I help? You don't come and parachute in and be sunshine patriots just to look like you're doing something when tensions are high. You show up for those community and you find the people who are the leaders of the community, those community organizers, those folks who are feeding the homeless, those folks who are having the diaper drives. You find them and you ask them how you can help. Now we're fighting for our bodies. We're fighting for clean air. We're fighting for water. And it's always our people. We were made sacrificial lambs a long time ago. So we're tired of fighting. But when we have money and resources, it makes the fight a little bit easier. And so it's so many things people can do. But the most important thing, again, for people who live in the community is to continue to tell their stories. And for the folks who don't live in the communities to show up and offer resources and help for the folks on the ground.
What are some current petrochemical fights going on now, and how can organizations and groups support that fight?
It's important that you know the projects that are coming, but it's also important to realize what keeps them coming. And so if we look at the project by project, but really, and we learned this from Formosa because we were the first location where we have a grain terminal that's trying to come. Formosa was supposed to come there first, and the land zoning was illegally changed, or so is being perpetrated that way to accommodate Formosa. There are systems in place like the zoning in your area that means everything. So watching those zoning is one thing you have to be careful about. The ports are another issue where the port, like the Port of South Louisiana, is one that we're dealing with. The minute you stop somebody from coming, they are out there drumming the streets, walking the streets all over the world, trying to find somebody else to replace them. Our tax dollars are being spent to support this, bringing in more petrochemical, LNG, all these grain elevators into our land. They're not even checking the accuracy of the zoning of the land. Is the zoning, is the way they zone Black communities, how they make it hard for us to even input in the zoning, how the state is ignoring us. The Port of South Louisiana, when we told them the land that they're trying to put the grain elevator on is zoned wrong, the Port of South Louisiana said, that's not our problem. That's not our problem. How does that happen when we put so much, when they're given so much power for them to say, we don't care if it's inaccurate information, we're just going to push for it because we can do it, or we think we can do it.
Last question. Is there anything I did not ask you that you want our audience to know in regards to fighting against petrochemicals?
I would just say that the petrochemical industry is not letting up, and they're still trying to push forward with a bunch of new projects to keep an eye on. Keep an eye out for our website, pushbackagainstpetrochemicals.org. We'll have a lot more information that we're going to add to help people all across the country stop this before they start.
There's this myth that we need the experts to come in and to save us, and they have the wisdom to just come into our communities, as Rashida said, to parachute in. I love that terminology, and to just fix everything. It has to come from outside in order to fix us. There's a lot we have inside, within, a lot of community expertise, a lot of wisdom, a lot of educated, formally educated people, to where we can rescue ourselves. We can be liberated from the systems. We don't have to have anything imposed on us anymore, especially this false solution of petrochemicals and dealing with their terms. So it's just looking within, identifying the community members who have what we need in order to get there, and working together as a cohort and moving forward and pushing forward. We have the power to do it.
You know, we are no longer going to sit idly by and be sacrificial lambs while folks become billionaires off of our backs, and we continue to struggle just to have the basic necessities of life: clean water, clean air, healthy foods to eat. Our ancestors fought for this land. This land is so fertile because of our blood. Those trees, that 400-year oak tree, probably has blood drippings from slaves who hung from it. And I also want to highlight the fact of all of this beautiful Black hair on here today, and all of these beautiful Black women, and just highlight the fact that women, specifically Black women, are the ones who are leading this fight across the world. And so we need money, we need funds, we need resources, we need folks to trust Black women to be able to solve the issues in our community.
Rashetta Ozane, Joe Banner, and Keisha Bernard, thank you so much for joining today.
Greetings. My name is Dr. Jalon White Newsome, and I am the CEO and founder of Empowering a Green Environment and Economy, a consulting firm based in southeastern Michigan on the original lands of the Potawatomi peoples. And for the last 2 decades, I've had the opportunity to work at the intersection of environmental and climate justice, public health, water equity, a little bit of everything, but pretty much trying to get clean air and clean water for the folks that deserve it, which is each and every one of us. The reason I decided to study this topic is because I have been passionate about addressing environmental racism for a long time. The fact that low-income communities, communities of color, indigenous communities seem to always get the short end of the stick, particularly when they are living in homes and communities that are hazardous to their health. So when the Bloomberg Philanthropies approached me last summer, I thought this was a wonderful opportunity to raise up research that would not just be for research's sake, but actually be useful for advocacy and to hopefully get us towards that clean energy future. The fights that these communities are facing in Texas, Louisiana, and the Ohio River Valley region is literally a fight for their life. Can you imagine living in your home or in a place and breathing in toxic contaminants every day? Can you imagine living next to sites where there's waste that is literally hazardous to your health? Can you imagine being fearful when there is a release of a toxic, dark cloud of something over your home and you're really not sure what to do about it? And so when you talk about the fight, it is literally a fight for what we all deserve as human beings, and that's the right to live in a clean, healthy environment. As was shared with me through this research, really one, the large influence that this industry has over politics, over decision making, over resource distribution, and the fact that even though we have data that shows the impacts of this industry that is definitely linked to the asthma, to the cancer, to the deaths that these communities unfortunately have experienced, it still remains a huge challenge that data is not enough. If you've only been in a place that has been deeply, where petrochemicals have been deeply embedded for decades and decades, the challenge is not only for the community members, but for those decision makers and for those that are in leadership positions in states and on planning committees and zoning committees to really think about, or really challenge themselves to think about, what is that different vision that will not only provide us economic prosperity and opportunity, but also take care of the folks that are within these communities so they can again have this level of health and wealth and wellness that we all deserve. When you talk about what these advocates and activists and regular people need to win, it's a couple of things. It's one, again, from our research, the human capacity and the financial capacity to withstand this long-term fight. This is not a sprint, it is a marathon. A lot of these communities didn't become spaces and places of legacy pollution and intense contamination overnight. We need to have funding and capacity support to support this long-haul challenge. And we also need to make sure, which is why I'm so excited about this public-facing report, that we need to continue to elevate and give these activists and advocates and regular folks the platform to be able to share their own stories in their own words. So not only talk about the challenges, but talk about the strategies and what's been successful. Because I really think it's going to take more than just the folks in these communities and regions to win back their health. It's going to take the folks outside of these regions to put pressure again on industry, to put pressure on the different levels of government to really see that the way that we're operating and have been operating is not sustainable for anyone, not our society, and especially not the folks that are dealing with this every day. Oftentimes our communities, not all the times, but oftentimes, we don't see the connection between the health outcomes that we're feeling with our environment. And so that basic education needs to happen that, my asthma could be connected to this plume of black stuff that I see, or the fact that we have a cancer cluster on our street means that something might not be right. There is an opportunity for Hip Hop Caucus and other organizations to use their platforms to bring this energy to be more intergenerational. I have a love and have always appreciated being around my elders and my grandparents and kind of listening to their stories, particularly in the civil rights movement and other movements that they were engaged in. And so how wonderful would it be to continue to create these spaces where the young folks in the Hip Hop Caucus to connect with many of the elders that are in these communities. So a lot of intergenerational opportunities for education and awareness and advocacy, I think, is another piece. And then to bring in new voices and new entities and new organizations that may not necessarily see themselves as environmentalists, but actually each of us should be environmentalists. And so are there organizations that have no idea what's going on that could be influential and use their power, as I like to say, for good? So I think there's a lot of ways that organizations like the Hip Hop Caucus and others can dig in and figure out what their role can be in this larger fight for humanity. As we think about the petrochemical industry and we think about the huge footprint, all of these fights need to be local. And so as you think about the folks that are so critical in this space, you have to think about your city council folks, your folks that are elected to serve on zoning committees and planning commissions. And let's not forget about the local public health departments and those public health officials and practitioners. And so how and really the opportunity to shift and influence these local leaders that can either say yay or nay to a permit or an action, I think is super critical. And that is the only way that we are going to win the larger fights, by really focusing at the local level. I am not one to do research just for the fun of it. And my hope is that this research will be a tool that can be used by communities and activists and advocates in many different ways. Thinking about some of the aspects of the report that really dig into the 10 priority actions that each of us, and wherever we sit, can take. This report is practical. It gives you actions. It identifies actually ways to operationalize those actions. And whether you're an economist, a student, a teacher, a community leader, a concerned mom, or an environmentalist, or a budding environmentalist, there's a place for you in this fight.
Hi, this is Rev Yearwood, President and CEO of the Hip Hop Caucus. And today we are talking with some of the most amazing activists who are literally fighting for us to breathe clean air and fighting for clean water. The mantra here is we shall breathe. And that's not a game, because we shall breathe. There are those who don't want us to breathe. There are those who are fighting for us not to breathe. But we are determined with everything inside of us, every fiber in our being, is that we shall breathe. And with me, I have activists who are around the country who are taking on petrochemicals head on. One of those activists is my dear sister from my great state of Louisiana, Sharon Levine. Sharon is just an amazing grandmother and activist in St. James Parish. She is running the faith-based environmental justice group Rise St. James and has been named the 2021 North American winner of the Goldman Environmental Prize for fighting to keep the multi-billion-dollar chemical plants out of her already polluted community. The other guest I have with me is Kathy Ferguson. Kathy Ferguson is a community advocate from the unincorporated district of Institute in West Virginia, and where she is championing racial, social, environmental, economic, and restorative justice causes. And then also with me, I have Vakia Nelson. Dr. Nelson is a dynamic leader committed to moving resources to communities fighting oil and gas expansion in the Gulf South. Ms. Sharon, I've heard you speak. You don't mince no words. You believe, which I believe, that the petrochemical industry's business plan is a death sentence for our community. And you said simply, shut it down. Shut it down. And you said that from everywhere you go. Why is that so important for folks who listen to you? Why are you so passionate? And why is it so important for those who say, man, we know we got pollution everywhere. Why is it so important to shut it down?
It's important to shut it down because if we don't shut it down, we will not live. That's the bottom line. We have to shut them down because if we don't shut them down, they will continue to pollute us. They will tell you that they're following the regulations of the EPA, and they're not. And the reason why I know that, because I know people that work there, and she said that when the EPA came to evaluate them, the people that work there know that they violated a lot of the regulations, and they just give them a pat on the back and go ahead on, and they continue to pollute. One oil tank had a spill. They wouldn't even call authorities, but I got on Facebook and I brought it out to the people. 2 weeks later, they called the parish president and reported the oil spill. They don't even care about us, I'm telling you. And they had oil in the land, in the ditch where Birdland is. The people called me to come and see the oil. They're afraid to call, so they asked me to call.
Wow. Dr. Vakia Nelson, why are they killing communities where Kathy is in West Virginia and Ms. Sharon is in St. James?
Many of the fossil fuel companies are getting tax incentives in order to set up in different communities. It's taking away from the economic tax base. They are operating in very lax regulatory environments. In the state of Texas and in Louisiana, as you're hearing, in Ohio River Valley, many of the violations are not fined. And so it's a very business-friendly environment, and the industry is not paying the true cost of what they're imposing on communities as well. So they're not feeling the true cost of doing business in the communities.
Ms. Kathy, give us a brief description of what you think a world without petrochemicals would look like.
Oh my gracious. I know it would be a challenge, that's for sure, because we have developed such a dependency on the derivatives of, petrochemicals. So like plastics, certainly would be a lot cleaner. I think there would be a lot of improved health outcomes, especially in communities of colors and fence line communities. We would be able to participate in the world with just far less hazards. Long term, I think this has, of course, implications in terms of global warming, our ability to live and reside in the areas where we live, in low-lying areas. And so there are a lot of implications, because of the petrochemical industry that we really need to start looking at as a whole, and really how it's intersecting with all of our lives here on the planet.
And Vakia, real for the folks who don't know, I know that communities use air monitors. Explain what that is. Does the EPA pay for that, and how that works?
Right. So there are different types of monitors, and you have a air monitoring, a regulatory system that the EPA has. However, those EPA regulatory monitors, they're spread out, and so there's a huge gap in understanding what people are being exposed to at the neighborhood level. And so that's why you see many communities now starting to set up community-based air monitoring networks so that they have the data so that they can inform their neighbors about when the air quality is bad, and can also use that data to advocate for change.
Ms. Sharon, I want to get right to you. Can you share a success story from your organizing work that led to the pause and or removal of a petrochemical plant from your community?
The land that Formosa purchased. With our attorneys, they wrote letters to the Army Corps of Engineers for us on our behalf, and the Army Corps of Engineers ordered them to have an EIS done, and right now it's on pause. They cannot construct, and they haven't done any construction as of now.
We understand the climate impacts and the carbon emissions that come from petrochemicals. I gotta say that y'all bless my heart so much, because I see on this frame so many powerful Black women fighting for our community and willing to speak truth to power. What's the vision that keeps you going? And so I want to start with you, Miss Kathy. A vision of a world without petrochemicals, one, but also what's it going to take to get there?
My focus right now is more on the legislative and governmental tip. You know, ultimately, we don't want this to be in our communities. We want to be able to breathe, and it's one of the things that I've testified about. The vision that I have is that we will get to a place where we can all be free. And when I say free, I mean completely free. Free. But free, free to live, free to be, and free to breathe.
Yeah, I think we need all hands on deck, and we also need all strategies that we have available to us. We're dealing with very powerful industries. We need the data to show the climate impacts that these facilities are having. We need communications, right? One thing that we know is that these industries have a 24-hour PR machine. The vision is for our communities to have to be able to wake up and not think about these issues, right? That's a heavy burden and weight, mental weight that we have to carry around on a daily basis. And so I think that is freedom, when you don't have to think about whether or not your health is being harmed in your home when you walk outside.
I envision a community that we had when I was a little girl. I could walk out the door and just take a deep breath of that clean air, and we could drink the water and not drink the benzene that's in the water. So I don't think that's too much to ask to live.
I mean, Sharon, I want to actually do something here special. I want you to pray right now for us. I want you to open up right now and just give us an ending prayer for us to get through this process.
Dear God, I come to you today, thanking you for letting us express our concerns. And dear God, we give it all to you, dear Jesus. We can't do this without you. We need you. We need your guidance. I thank you for everyone that's on this call this morning. This call is important to me because I have people on this call that want to help us. I want to save the people in St. James, in Virginia, and all over the world. But dear God, you told me to do this fight. You put this fight in me that no man could take away from me. And dear God, I thank you for doing that. When I went to you with tears in my eyes and asked you what I should do, if I should sell the home that you gave me, if I should sell the land that my grandparents left for us. And you told me no. So I know this is for real. And I know Formosa Plastics will not build in St. James Parish, and no other industry will come to St. James Parish, because you will stop this. You said it's enough, and we all know it's enough. And I want to thank you. Thank you for everything that you're doing for all of us, dear Jesus. Amen.
Amen. Amen. We shall reap. We shall reap. Thank y'all so much.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Houston and the Houston Ship Channel is the largest chemicals port in our entire nation.
The smell is strong. There's no way to escape it here.
It's affecting the community big time.
I am very angry having to experience the loss of a child and what he endured.
Here is full of cancer patients. The politicians is the reasons we are being poisoned and we are dying. Give thanks to them, we are dying.
Do not let the petrochemical industry select the candidates.
The coal industry, the petrochemical industry, and the oil and gas industry, they all really have one goal, and that's profit at the price of people.
Being an advocate, we don't run away from fires, we run to fires to get the reality of what's going on the ground.
If you don't fight, how are you going to win?
I'm still that kid from the ghetto with dreams I won't let go. That's why I'm always on my grind. I'm not gonna stop till I get it all, but they want me to fail, yo. They think I'm just wasting my time. While everyone's satisfied just living their lives, I wanna live forever. It's why I go hard today until the day I die. Cause I believe. I believe, I believe, I believe, I believe, I believe, I believe. Watch me go where I ain't ever been to see what I've never seen. There were days I admit I did not believe that I would succeed, that I would blow, that my name would grow, that the world would know my flow, but as long as I breathe, they're gonna know. Cause come whatever may come, nothing will ever stop me. I'm talking whatever, bring all the above. Nothing will ever stop me. I'm still that kid from the ghetto with dreams I won't let go. That's why I'm always on my grind. I'm not gonna stop till I get it all, but they want me to fail, yo. They think I'm just wasting my time. While everyone's satisfied just living their lives, I wanna live forever. It's why I go hard today until the day I die. Cause I believe. I believe, I believe, I believe, I believe, I believe, I believe. Every day is a blessing in my eyes. If not a blessing, a lesson's in store for me. No dark cloud can block out my sunshine. It might hurt, but it's only temporary. Every day I'm on stage and the spotlight keeps shining while the crowd go crazy waving at me. World tours, red carpets, yeah, that's my life. All cause I believe. I'm still that kid from the ghetto, with dreams I won't let go. That's why I'm always on my grind. I'm not gonna stop till I get it all, but they want me to fail, yo. They think I'm just wasting my time. While everyone's satisfied